Good morning, folks. Good morning. How are you? Hope you are doing well. Leonard Robinson, your host again today, and we are moving forward on our little scene. Um, for those of you who are new, I'm doing these animations under our little title, Let's Animate, Work in Progress. This is a film that I'm making, and as I work on it, I talk about what I'm doing, and as I'm working on it, I'm basically showing you how I'm making it. And so if you are making your own short film or whatever it is type of animated project you're doing, then you need to be able to see someone working in real time. That's the reason that I do this particular type of video to help you. The software that I'm using is Rough Animator, which is a very inexpensive software to use. And I also use Movavi Video Editor to edit my scenes together. So as I work, I step by step show you what I'm doing, and hopefully that will be a help to you in the process of you making your own animated film. All right, so let's move forward. So let's see, we are adding the bottom. We're basically what we're doing right now is I'm tracing over the rough animation, and so I'm going to actually turn off my going to turn off the uh, onion skin. All I really need to see here is just the lower half, which I'm tracing. I've in between the lower half already, so the drawings already exist. So all I really need to do at this point is just clean them up and paint them. So that's what I'm doing now. Miguel, who is this little character that I'm doing, his line work is all black, and I'm using a solid line here. When you look at the brush, you get you can choose different brushes, and so in this particular case, I have the solid brush, and so I'm cleaning him up with a solid brush here. And one thing that you can do, is always have your setting on your tablet so that it's easy for you to clean up your drawings. So you want to have it set so that it's convenient, so that the drawing that you're making or the cleanup or whatever it is you're doing is going to be easy. And so, you might need to blow up the drawing a little bit. And um, once you have a color palette in the, if you have your scene painted, then it's going to be easy for you to follow the colors because you'll have them already in front of you. I also set my palette so that I'm drawing behind stuff, and I do it that way because once again it makes it easy to keep everything consistent. If I'm drawing behind on the lines, then when they intersect with each other, they don't run on top of each other. They run underneath each other, and that makes it a lot more. It just looks cleaner. Now, as far as line quality goes, you can decide how much you want to make your line quality be a certain kind of perfection. Within certain programs, you can create lines that um, have a much more perfect feel to them. That's not what I'm doing with this. I'm literally just drawing it by hand. And so there's going to be imperfections in my lines, but I'm not concerning myself with it because it's not important to me. I'm doing it by hand. I like the hand created quality of the line, um, because that's the artistic angle that I'm looking at this from. So I'm not trying to make it perfect. I'm trying to make it have a certain flow to it. And your line work, that's up to you. Now, like, some programs will let you create a certain kind of line. But you have to think now, if you create a certain kind of line, you do have to kind of keep that consistent, or then it has a tendency of flickering around as you clean up your drawings. You're going to have an inconsistency with the way the line looks. But if you do things by hand, the eye doesn't notice little imperfections quite so much, especially when it's moving. So, animation is not a perfect art form, but there's a lot of things that you can kind of get away with when you're doing animation because the eye doesn't see, you don't see a 24th of a second very easily or a 12th of a second that easily. So realistically, you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff in animation. You're not going to notice it, um, just because it's moving so fast that you don't see the imperfections in the line work and all that. So you can kind of push your luck a little bit on it, and it's going to be all right. I remember the first time I went to work for Disney Company back in the 70s when I first was training and learning animation. And of course, I was very fascinated by the old Disney cartoons, and I wanted to see some of the original artwork. And back then, we all had access to the morgue. The morgue was um, a basement area down in the Ink and Paint building where they kept original artwork from all of their animated films going back to Snow White and even some of the old silly symphonies. You could go into this morgue, as we called it, or as it was called, and actually touch the original drawings from Snow White, actually see the original background paintings. It was really something to see. And I think the thing that was the most um, noticeable to me about looking at original artwork is the fact that you could see that it was hand created. You could see that this was done by a human, that it was not perfect. And I'm not going to say that there were little imperfections in the drawings, because for the most part, if you looked at them carefully, you could see that there was an awful lot of love involved, I would say, in whoever would do whichever drawing or whatever. You could see the effort put into it. But you could still see that this was created by a human being. It was not perfect. And that was really kind of a revelation, because you tend to think when you look at these old films, you tend to think of them, well, at least I did anyway, as being these perfect things. But I guess realizing that this was something that someone actually did by hand, I think it kind of brought it down to reality. And it made me realize that it was attainable, that it was something that I could do myself. And while, the great artists that came ahead of us, certainly some of the best people to do this stuff, even they, a lot of times, they would even teach us about animation and talk to us about, how this stuff was done. And even they were encouraging, because they would say that, yes, you can do this. You can achieve this level of quality. And that was very encouraging to hear, because most of us, at the time that I was learning animation, we had tremendous respect for the great artists that came before us. I think it's very important to recognize the quality of what what we do in this industry. It's a very wonderful industry, doing the animated feature films, and or any animated projects for that matter. But the people who came ahead of us paved the way for us to do what we do, and it's just very inspiring, very inspiring. So, so I learned a lot, and I was very fortunate to be able to work with some of these great artists and hear their wisdom and hear how they did what they did. It was This was very, very inspiring. So um, I think that in a sense, actually, really, there is a level of humility that comes with understanding that human beings contribute a very large part of the inspiration for what, well, they contribute really all of the thing that creates the inspiration for why we do what we do and why it looks the way it looks. Um, so we don't ever want to get lose sight of what the human condition is and what we can do artistically. You don't want, there's all this, the AI and what have you. And AI is great. I think it's a terrific tool. It's our next revolution, and I think we should be thankful for it, but we should also utilize it wisely, but not to ever forget the beauty of what can be done, what an individual, what a human being can contribute artistically. There's a lot that we can bring to the table as artists, and I would hope that we don't lose that. Um, the imperfections that happen or that can happen in the process of making a film are not necessarily always hindrances. They might actually, in some ways, be a help. And by that I mean they might actually open our minds up to the fact that it's the individual contribution that makes what we do so memorable. Maybe we don't. Maybe we need to remember that. Maybe we need to remember that it's okay if things aren't perfect, But maybe we need to give it a little bit of respect. Have a little bit of respect for um, what you can do, uh, even if it's not perfect. You know, just something to think about. So, I mean, the old animators, a lot of them they were just so good at what they did. you know, some of them seem like their work was just absolutely impeccable. When I think of, Milt Kahl, for instance, is an animator who's so highly spoken of, and rightly so. Um, and even he didn't seem to. He was. I don't know whether he was intentionally self-effacing or I don't know, but the level of quality of what Milt Kahl was capable of doing in some ways seems almost unattainable. His abilities were just amazing. I mean, by today's standards, you look at someone like that and you think, gosh, how could I ever get even close to what he could do? But the fact that a human being could do that shows that it is attainable. Everybody may not be able to accomplish that level of quality, but it's still inspiring to see someone that did do it and could do it, and that's good. It sets the bar pretty high, and it also gives us something to shoot for. And I mean, isn't that the point? I mean, isn't that why we do what we do? We do what we do, and we go for the very best because we care about the quality of what we do. We actually care about what we're making, and it's in that process of caring about what we make that the quality and the high level of attainment of a certain level of quality, that's how we get to that place. If we didn't have examples that were, you know, high on the scale, then we wouldn't have any way to know that we could even attain to certain levels of skill. So it's good to have somebody that attains to it so that we can be inspired to try. And even if we don't achieve it, we still are going to be a lot further along than than where we started. So, I mean, I got to figure that, it's better to shoot for the stars, because even if you miss them, you're certainly a heck of a lot further than you were when you started. So I don't know. I think that's a good way to look at life. Good way to look at a lot of things. All right. But I guess the main thing here is that I'm stressing with this is that the imperfections are okay. Um, doesn't mean you shouldn't strive to not make a lot of mistakes. I don't mean that. I just mean that, you can have a certain level of imperfections in the work, and it'll be fine. Shoot for the best. Try to do your best. But, if you don't quite make it, well, you know, don't have a cow, man, as Bart Simpson would say. Do your best and move on from there. So, all right. So I'm just, cleaning up and painting together. So I'm doing the two things in tandem. It's great to, when you're doing your own film, the whole process can be, you can set things up so that you can get things done a lot more efficiently when you're doing a lot of stuff yourself. The only reason why you would have all these different stages is because you'd have, within a production system, usually there are going to be many different people working on the same project. And so that's the reason why you have to divide things up. That's why that exists. But when you're doing something yourself, you can take more liberties in how you're going to do it. You know, you don't have to say, for instance, do all of the just like in animation. We had it down to a point where you even in painting the cells, um, the acetate cells, you would have some people all they painted was one color, and then they pass the cell to the next person and they paint another color. And the only reason why they did it that way was because it took the pressure off of one person having to paint all the colors, themselves. But see, when you're doing something yourself, you can be more expeditious. You can just say, okay, well, I'm going to do the color now, and you just do all the color. Or like cleanup, for instance, like, I'm doing this cleanup line right now, but the process of that, like inking, for instance, for the color, there would be a whole step where you wouldn't even do the inking until you had a clean pencil drawing on paper for the inker to trace. So the inker was tracing another cleanup artist's work, and then so it was almost like it was being cleaned up again. It was being cleaned up twice. You had the cleanup of the on paper, and then you had another cleanup for the cell. You know, but this was being done by different people. See, and so that in some ways, I wanted to say it was necessarily faster, but when you have more people working on the same cartoon, you can get it done quicker, even when you've got all these steps. If you're doing something yourself, then you can blend some of those things together, like I'm doing now, where I'm putting, I'm doing the cleanup. I'm inking. That's really what I'm doing now, actually, technically, is I'm inking this cell. It's not a cell, it's a digital image, but I'm inking it and painting it at the same time. So that's the difference. In a production system, might be somebody that would do just this part of the work, just tracing the lines with black, and they might do all of that and hand that off in a file to someone else who would do the color, you know. And that might be how you do it in a production system. And that's fine. you know. But, you're doing, the beauty of today's production is that the fact that you actually can do an entire production yourself. And so you change the rules a little bit so that it works better for what you're doing individually. So let's see, we'll bring this down. And let's hit save. Take a look at what we've got done so far. Yeah. Yeah, that's working pretty good. Little Miguel. Well, I think we'll stop here. We're at 20 minutes. So, all right. So as you can see, I talk about this all the time this way, but as you work, you can have your own method of how you get through production. You may feel fine about going through and only doing certain steps and then coming back and doing other steps. That really is up to you how you work. You don't need to necessarily follow how I'm doing something exactly. My purpose of doing these, as I said before, is to show you this is what I'm doing. And if that can be helpful to you, then you can see me step by step what I'm doing and see how it benefits the film as I'm working on it. So there you go. All right, good folks, I will see you tomorrow. Have a beautiful day. Don't forget to thank God who gives us and blesses us with our skills and abilities. Thank Him because we wouldn't have anything without Him. I'll see you tomorrow, and don't forget, Jesus is Lord.